You wake up and something feels off. The world looks the same, but you don't. Your chest is heavy, your thoughts slow, your joy absent. People call it depression, but what if it's not an illness? What if it's a message? What if you're not broken, but simply disconnected from the deepest, most sacred part of yourself? Depression is often misunderstood as merely a chemical imbalance or a clinical state that must be eradicated through medication and behavioral correction. While biological factors can certainly play a role, this view tends to reduce the rich inner complexity of the human experience to mechanical dysfunction. In truth, what is often labeled as depression may in fact be the soul's desperate attempt to communicate something vital to the conscious self. It is not merely a malfunction, it is a message. The emotional heaviness, the fatigue, the withdrawal from daily life, the sense of meaninglessness, all these symptoms can be viewed not as the problem itself, but as indicators that something deeper within is being ignored, neglected, or repressed. This state emerges when the soul, the authentic, intuitive, spiritual core of a person, is disconnected from conscious awareness. In the modern world, there is an overemphasis on rationality, productivity, image, and conformity. We are conditioned from an early age to value outward success and external approval. In the process, many people lose touch with their inner world, their dreams, their imagination, their deep values and inner longings. The voice of the soul, subtle and symbolic, gets drowned out in the noise of daily demands and societal expectations. When this voice is ignored for too long, it doesn't disappear. It finds other ways to express itself. One of the ways it cries out is through what we call depression. Depression, in this sense, can be viewed as a sacred protest. The soul is rebelling against the life that no longer reflects its truth. The person might find themselves unable to get out of bed, not because of laziness or lack of will, but because the current structure of their life no longer holds any real meaning for them. They may lose interest in relationships, careers, or ambitions that once felt fulfilling because these were built around the ego's desires, not the soul's calling. When a person becomes too far removed from their true nature, from their inner truth, depression may rise like a fog, clouding everything, as a way of forcing them to stop, look inward, and reckon with their deeper needs. In this context, sadness is not merely a symptom to be eradicated, but a guidepost pointing toward what the soul is missing. The disconnection from soul often stems from a lack of inner reflection and silence, the kind of quiet that allows one to hear their true self beneath the surface. In the fast-paced world of distraction, where everything external demands attention, there is little space to listen inwardly. Yet that is precisely where the healing begins, in the acknowledgement that the sadness is trying to lead us home, not pull us into darkness. The inner world, with all its dreams, symbols, archetypes, and stories, is a vast terrain that holds the keys to our healing and wholeness. When depression strikes, it is often a sign that one has been away from this inner terrain for too long. The soul is not something abstract or poetic. It is the vital center of who we are, and when it is silenced, the psyche revolts. This revolt may feel painful, frightening, and disorienting, but it is ultimately in service of wholeness. It is the inner self calling us back, insisting that we listen, insisting that we realign our lives with what is meaningful, truthful, and real. The concept of the persona refers to the mask or social identity one wears in public, the version of ourselves we present to the world to gain acceptance, approval, and belonging. From childhood, we are taught, often unconsciously, which aspects of ourselves are acceptable and which are not. We quickly learn to behave in ways that win praise and affection, and to suppress or hide traits that provoke disapproval, discomfort, or rejection. This learned performance eventually shapes the persona, a crafted version of the self that aligns with societal expectations, but often bears little resemblance to our inner truth. While the persona is necessary to function in society, over-identifying with it leads to a dangerous disconnection from the deeper, authentic self. In time, the mask becomes so convincing, not just to others but to ourselves, that we forget it is a mask. We believe we are the role, the successful professional, the obedient child, the likable friend, the self-sufficient adult. Beneath that role, however, live emotions, desires, thoughts, and instincts that may not fit the social mold. These inner contents do not vanish just because they are hidden. They remain alive in the unconscious, gathering energy and waiting to be acknowledged. When they are ignored for too long, they begin to seep through the cracks of the persona, often in the form of psychological distress, including depression. When the persona dominates the psyche, the true self is silenced. The soul is reduced to a whisper beneath layers of performance and adaptation. Depression often emerges as a result of this inner split, the conflict between who we appear to be and who we truly are. A person may feel lifeless or empty, not because their life is objectively lacking, but because their existence is built around a mask that no longer holds meaning. They may have everything they were told to want: success, relationships, respect, and yet feel profoundly disconnected, as though something essential is missing. That something is the soul, the inner truth, the self that longs to be expressed in its fullness without distortion or disguise. The persona resists this truth because it is afraid. It fears rejection, humiliation, chaos. It clings to control, to image, to routine. But the soul does not speak in the language of safety or conformity. It speaks in symbols, dreams, longings, and pain. The tension between these two forces, the desire to be real and the need to be accepted, creates a psychological rift. If the persona is all that is allowed to live, the soul will rebel. Depression can be the manifestation of this rebellion, a shutdown of enthusiasm, energy, and engagement with the outer world, because the inner world is starving for attention. Many people suffering from depression describe feeling like actors in their own lives, going through the motions, smiling on the outside while dying on the inside. This haunting dissonance is not merely emotional, it is existential. The human spirit was not meant to be confined to a social role. It was meant to evolve, to express itself, to connect with something deeper than approval. Healing begins when one begins to recognize the mask for what it is, a useful but limited construct, and starts to explore what lies behind it. To reclaim the soul, one must dare to step beyond the persona and reconnect with the raw, unfiltered self that has been waiting patiently to be remembered. The human psyche is structured in a way that thrives on meaning. Meaning is not just a philosophical ideal, it is a psychological necessity. When a person loses touch with what gives their life meaning and purpose, the result is often an existential emptiness that manifests emotionally as sadness, restlessness, or despair. These emotional states are not always the product of trauma or chemical imbalance. They can also stem from a soul that is deprived of nourishment, a life that is adrift from its deeper currents. This loss of meaning is one of the most common and silent causes of depression. People may live outwardly successful lives, meet societal expectations, and still feel as though they are suffocating internally because their actions, choices, and relationships lack genuine alignment with their inner truth. Purpose gives a sense of direction. It serves as an internal compass, allowing a person to navigate the inevitable hardships of life with a deeper sense of why. Without this orientation, even the smallest difficulties become overwhelming, and even the greatest pleasures feel hollow. Depression, in this context, can be understood as a spiritual crisis, a loss of connection to one's path, not just in terms of career or goals, but in the richer, more symbolic sense of why one is here. It is not uncommon for individuals to wake up one day and feel as if their life has become foreign to them. They may no longer recognize the person they have become. They may no longer feel connected to the things that once excited them. This is not a flaw or a failure. It is a signal that something deeper is calling out for attention. Modern life encourages productivity over introspection, performance over authenticity. Many people are caught in cycles of doing, achieving, and proving themselves, with little time or space to reflect on whether any of it is truly meaningful to them. The soul does not thrive in this environment. It becomes buried under schedules, obligations, and roles, and when the soul is buried, it withdraws its energy. The vitality and spontaneity that once flowed easily become blocked. A person might feel numb, fatigued, or disinterested in things they used to love. This is not laziness. It is the psyche's response to a life that no longer resonates with its essence. Often, people think they are broken when they are simply misaligned. They try to fix their symptoms with distractions, medication, or external changes, not realizing that what they truly need is reconnection with themselves, with their values, with their passions, and with the mystery of existence. The soul is always seeking meaning, and when it cannot find it in the outer world, it retreats inward. Depression then becomes the terrain of descent, not into disorder, but into rediscovery. It is a dark night of the soul, where the old ways of being are no longer sustainable, and the new self is not yet born. In that liminal space, there is immense pain, but also the potential for profound transformation. The healing process requires one to ask deep, uncomfortable questions. What do I truly care about? What makes my life feel worth living? What am I doing that drains me, and what calls me to something greater? These are not casual questions. They are invitations to reconnect with the parts of oneself that have been long forgotten. In doing so, one begins to step out of the fog of disconnection and reorient toward a life that feels real, purposeful, and alive. Much of the emotional pain we experience does not arise from what is happening in the present, but from what has been hidden or rejected within us over time. The human psyche is not a single unified self, but a complex landscape filled with various parts, some conscious, others pushed into the unconscious because they do not align with the image we or others expect us to uphold. These rejected aspects form what is often called the shadow, the emotional, psychological, and instinctual contents we suppress because they feel shameful, dangerous, or unacceptable. Anger, grief, envy, fear, vulnerability, unfulfilled desire, all of these, when unacknowledged, sink into the shadow, becoming not less powerful but more so. And the more we suppress, the more fragmented we become inside. This fragmentation is one of the core roots of depression. When parts of ourselves are denied, they do not disappear, they wait. They simmer in the unconscious and emerge in ways that are often confusing and disruptive. A person may not understand why they suddenly feel overwhelmed, fatigued, or inexplicably sad. These feelings may seem to come from nowhere, but in truth, they come from within, from the unspoken, unfelt, unprocessed energies that have been locked away. Every time we tell ourselves to get over it, stay strong, or move on without truly processing what we feel, we deepen the split within. And over time, this split creates emotional exhaustion, numbness, and a sense of disconnection from life itself. Emotions are messengers. They arise not to torment us, but to guide us. Grief tells us what we've lost and what mattered to us. Anger reveals where our boundaries have been crossed or our integrity violated. Fear speaks to our vulnerability and reminds us where we need safety or courage. When we repress these emotions, we silence vital communication from the soul. We also deny ourselves the full experience of being human. Depression often becomes the blanket that covers all these unexpressed feelings, a thick fog of dullness and despair that signals something is wrong, even if we can't name it. It is not the emotion itself that is dangerous, but the refusal to feel it. The psyche can endure pain if it is conscious. What breaks us is the weight of unconscious suffering. In many cases, depression is a defense mechanism, a way the mind protects us from the intensity of what we are not yet ready to feel. But the cost of that protection is high. We become numb not just to pain, but to joy. We lose touch with vitality, creativity, connection. Life becomes muted. The key to healing lies in turning toward the shadow, not away from it. This means creating space for emotional honesty. It means feeling what we've avoided, grieving what we never mourned, and acknowledging parts of ourselves we've been taught to deny. It is not easy work. It takes courage, patience, and often deep discomfort. But it is also the most profound act of self-reclamation. The journey into the shadow is not about becoming consumed by negativity. It is about integration. It is about wholeness. When we allow our full emotional life to exist, not just the pleasant parts, but the rage, the sorrow, the despair, we begin to retrieve lost pieces of ourselves, and in doing so, we restore inner balance. The depression begins to lift not because we force it away, but because we listen to what it has been trying to tell us all along. It is not an enemy. It is a guide, one that leads us into the depths, not to destroy us, but to bring us back home to our whole, feeling human self. There is a profound and often unrecognized tension that lives within every human being, the conflict between the ego and the soul. The ego is the constructed identity we rely on to function in the world. It is shaped by our experiences, upbringing, culture, and personal defenses. It thrives on control, stability, recognition, and achievement. The ego seeks to build a secure and successful life in accordance with the expectations of society and the demands of the external world. In contrast, the soul is the timeless, intuitive, and deeper aspect of who we are. It is not concerned with appearances or safety. It is concerned with truth, growth, meaning, and authenticity. While the ego works to preserve the status quo, the soul often calls for change, risk, and transformation, even if that means discomfort or loss. When these two forces are not in harmony, the inner life becomes a battleground. Many people live under the rule of the ego without ever realizing that the soul has been silenced. They chase goals that are not truly theirs, follow paths that feel hollow, and adopt values that do not align with their inner truth. The result is a subtle but persistent feeling of emptiness or dissatisfaction. Over time, this dissonance can lead to a collapse of the ego's structure, and depression may follow. The person may feel as if life has lost its color and direction, not because of any specific event, but because they are out of alignment with the deeper current of their being. The ego fears change. It resists anything that threatens its image of success or control. When the soul begins to stir, often through intuition, dreams, or even painful emotions, the ego pushes back, dismissing these signals as irrational, unrealistic, or inconvenient. But the soul cannot be ignored forever. If it is repeatedly silenced, it begins to withdraw its energy. The result is a life that feels flat, uninspired, or meaningless. This is not failure. It is a natural, psychological, and spiritual consequence of neglecting the inner self. Depression then becomes not just an emotional state, but a symbolic expression of this inner war. The psyche is divided, one part pushing forward into external accomplishment, another part pulling inward toward authenticity and reflection. This conflict is not pathological, it is a necessary part of the journey toward wholeness. The soul is not trying to destroy the ego, but to expand and deepen the personality beyond superficial roles and identities. The depression that arises in this process can be understood as the death of an old way of being, a breakdown of the ego's control that makes space for something more authentic to emerge. It is a painful initiation into a new mode of living, one that honors both the practical needs of the ego and the deeper callings of the soul. The suffering is not meaningless. It is a crucible for transformation. To move through this conflict, one must begin to listen, not just to the loud voice of the ego, but to the quiet whisper of the soul. This requires stillness, courage, and humility. It means questioning assumptions, shedding false identities, and daring to live in a way that reflects one's innermost truth. It is not an easy path, but it is a necessary one. Only by recognizing and respecting this inner dialogue can we begin to move out of depression and into a life that feels coherent, alive, and whole. The goal is not to silence one part of the self, but to integrate both, the structured strength of the ego and the soulful depth of the inner self, into a unified, conscious existence. Modern life is built upon speed, distraction, and relentless productivity. From the moment we wake up, we are inundated with stimulation. Phones buzzing, calendars packed, news cycles spinning endlessly. We are taught to chase goals, to keep moving, to measure our worth by output and efficiency. In this hurried world, stillness is seen as laziness, and solitude is mistaken for isolation. Yet the soul does not speak in noise, it speaks in silence. It does not reveal itself under pressure, it emerges slowly, in quiet moments of reflection, introspection, and connection to something deeper than the surface of life. When we are constantly distracted and externally focused, we lose touch with this inner voice. And the more disconnected we become from this voice, the more we begin to feel lost, hollow, or fatigued in ways we cannot logically explain. Depression often arises not because there is something wrong with us, but because we have drifted too far from the rhythms of the soul. We are overstimulated yet undernourished. Our minds are filled with information, but our hearts are starving for presence. The world encourages us to stay busy, to always be on, but the soul longs for slowness, depth, and meaning. This imbalance creates a profound inner void. We may be surrounded by people and still feel lonely. We may be achieving success and still feel empty. That emptiness is not a sign of failure. It is a signal that we are not living in alignment with the deeper truths within us. Silence and solitude are not luxuries. They are essential psychological spaces where the self can reconnect with itself. In these quiet moments, without distraction or performance, we begin to hear what we have long silenced, feelings we've buried, thoughts we've ignored, dreams we've abandoned. They all begin to rise to the surface. This can be uncomfortable at first, which is why many people avoid stillness altogether. But discomfort is not something to be feared. It is the gateway to authenticity. When we sit in silence and allow what is inside to come forward, we begin to rediscover who we truly are, beneath the noise and the roles we've been conditioned to play. In solitude, we begin to recover the language of the soul, the symbols in our dreams, the pull of our intuitions, the ache for something more meaningful. It is in these moments that we remember what truly matters to us, what we value, what we long for, what we've been missing. The soul cannot be accessed in haste. It opens only when we slow down, when we soften, when we make space for it to speak. And when it speaks, we often find that the depression we thought was a problem to be fixed was actually a call to return to this sacred inner space. To reconnect with the soul, we must create environments that allow us to hear it. This might mean spending time alone in nature, journaling our unfiltered thoughts, meditating without expectation, or simply sitting in quiet observation of our feelings. It means stepping away from the frantic pace of the world and entering into a deeper relationship with ourselves. The more we engage in these practices, the more our inner life begins to blossom. The depression may not vanish overnight, but it begins to shift, because we are no longer ignoring the very part of us that holds the key to healing. We are listening, and in that act of listening, we start to feel alive again, not because we have added something new, but because we have returned to what was always there. The soul, waiting quietly to be remembered. So what we often label as depression may in truth be a sacred summons from the soul, a quiet rebellion against a life that no longer honors who we really are. It is not always a sign of dysfunction, but a sign that something vital within us is asking to be seen, felt, and reclaimed. The sadness, the fatigue, the numbness, these are not enemies, but signals that we have strayed from our essence, our meaning, our emotional truth. To heal, we must turn inward. We must listen. We must honor the parts we have silenced and allow the inner voice, the soul, to speak again. This is not the path of fixing what is wrong, but of remembering what is real. And in doing so, we don't just escape the darkness, we find the light that was buried within it all along.